Ooh, when I start my podcast, it will be possible to share me, like that unleashed version. Again, it's a journey to put your words out there. It's a journey to be confident. It's a journey to maybe share some of those things that you wouldn't normally get on stage to share. That feels really good to be expressed, fully expressed. It really does. It's scary. It feels really, really good.
Welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. Reveal and define your voice to speak your truth through the power of podcasting. And I'm your host, Mary Chan. So let's go. Hey, thanks for listening. This is episode number 61. What's stopping you from starting a podcast? With Kelly Geisler. This episode is going to be a goodie, especially if you haven't started your podcast yet. You've been going down that rabbit hole of Google, figuring things out on your own, maybe feeling overwhelmed about where to start, what mic should I buy, what do I do first, all of those questions. Or maybe you've just started your podcast and, you're still in the early stages. You're still getting the feel of things and what's working and what's not. Heck, maybe you've even produced episodes in the double or triple digits at this point. You are still going to find some great moments to reflect on from this episode, no matter where you are on your podcasting journey. Because we all have our own limiting beliefs. Our own voice journey is different when we podcast. What I love about this interview is actually, I have known Kelly in our networking group, the Empowered Business Networking, and she never mentioned really about starting a podcast. But then at one point we were in a breakout room together and she said, you know what? I have had that idea of starting a podcast, but I just haven't started one yet. And I've got all these limiting beliefs around it. And you know what? I'd love to share that on your podcast too if you want. And I was like, yes, let's do that. I planned well in advance, and so we weren't going to schedule this interview until very recently. I wanted to get into her head about what is stopping her from starting a podcast, not with the intention to have her as a client, but just because I know it'll help you as well as a podcaster if I did some research with other people who are thinking or not thinking about starting a podcast. But between scheduling the interview to happen and recording that interview, she actually booked into my program. So full transparency, she is signed up to do my one-on-one 12-week launch course. But the story of how she had that spark of an idea to podcast, how it stopped, that is still all the same. So we're going to be sharing that journey of what it's like for her going from that idea to now taking the first step in working with me to launch her podcast. So let me introduce to you Kelly Geisler, who through using her background as a business and mindset coach and her work with human design, she's getting past her fear of failure and wondering even if she has anything important to say and all of those other limiting beliefs when it comes to starting her podcast. Through our conversation, she'll share how she identified and overcame the mental blocks. And what specifically were those limiting beliefs that were holding her back from creating a successful, sustainable, and profitable business, and now ultimately as she becomes a podcaster as well. She is passionate about helping spiritual entrepreneurs to align their purpose and profits so they can make a greater impact while creating a life of abundance and success. And you'll hear her journey from not wanting to start a podcast because of how other people's fears influenced her decisions negatively to being ready to unleash, she says it, unleash who she really is on an intimate platform in podcasting, which ultimately is to share her voice and message. Kelly is so inspirational and you can hear her heart in her voice. I love hearing people's heart voice. So listen into this uplifting conversation with Kelly Geisler. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thanks, Mary. It's awesome to be here.
I am really, really excited because when we had first met through our networking group, you didn't mention anything about a podcast. And then eventually you're like, oh, yeah, I'm thinking about starting, maybe, I don't know. And then recently you're like, I'm starting a podcast.
I love it.
So I just want to take people on that journey because I know there have been lots of other podcasters that I've talked to who had very similar situations go on, right? It's that spark of an idea to start a podcast and then it kind of goes away and nothing ever happens. And eventually, hopefully, you do start a podcast. So I would love for you to share that story. So take me through your thought process about why you initially wanted to start a podcast.
Well, and I first want to start with all the reasons why I shouldn't have started a podcast because people were very vocal with me to say, don't do it, Kelly. And that's important to note. It really is because so I'm also a mindset coach. So as coaches, we want to get our messages out there. We want to get our message out to our soulmate community because we are here to serve them. And at the beginning of the early stages of my business, people would come to me and say, Kelly, don't think of a podcast. It's a saturated market. And then I started developing these mindset blocks of, oh, who am I, little old Kelly, to take up space in the global, podcast market? And so really that caused a big delay. And then it was also, do I have something important to say? So I had to work through those two blocks. Now the first one wasn't so blocking, if you will, because I was like, no, you know what? Just because there's other people that are out there, I can do this too. And it was really about me developing that I have something important to say and people want to hear what I have to say. That has taken some time. And that has been developed so that belief, that limiting belief that turned into an empowered belief of I do have something important to say. I do have a soulmate community that wants to hear my message, that wants to learn from me, that wants to grow with me. That was an evolution as my business evolved and as I grew more confidence in what I was doing and what I was speaking in my marketing and who I was speaking to. So it really did grow with me. Now, earlier this year, it was, doing your 12 months of planning, business planning. It was like, I think the podcast is going to be a thing for me this year, but I'm not going to jump into it. I'm going to do it kind of methodically. I'm going to use all my business knowledge. I'm going to use everything that I have and plan this out. So I had met Mary early on this year and I was like, okay, so I knew who I wanted to hire. I knew I wanted to hire help because I didn't want to figure this all out myself. I knew who I wanted to hire. And it just became a thing of timing. When is it going to be the right timing in my business? I had other things that I was doing in my business and I want to give it the full attention. I want to launch it appropriately. I want to, spend the time pre-recording the episodes. And so I wanted to give it its own space. And here was the fun fact. So we loosely planned to start in June, and that was a great loose plan. Now, I'm also a human design expert. I'm a manifesting generator, which means to me that I'm not here to initiate. I'm actually here to respond to life. I am not here to, really initiate and make things happen. And so as June was approaching, I was looking at, okay, I know I told Mary it was possibly going to be June. I'm going to feel into this. I'm going to see if this is still the right thing, but I'm not going to initiate. I'm not going to initiate. I'm going to wait for life to come to me and I'm going to respond. And this is going to come from my response strategy in human design. And there's reasons for that I don't need to go into unless you want me to, but there's reasons for that. And it really assures energetic alignment. So last week, and I just put it out there, like I'm going to lean back and I'm going to wait to respond. And last week, a beautiful spiritual mentor led me through this beautiful visioning process to vision my next 6 months. And you know what? The woman that's standing 6 months from now is a podcast host. And she was confident and she had a message to share. And I remember just feeling like I belonged and that I belonged in the space. I belonged in the room. I belonged with sharing my empowered voice. And, of course, as she was guiding me, like, what is your right next step? And I hung up and I hired Mary. I'm like, I'm not going to let my mind sabotage this. This was clear energetic alignment. And she's like, what's the one word that you're going to wrap up the session? And I was like, it was green light. It was green light. I'm like, I got my green light to start my podcast. And I literally hung up and hired Mary.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because we did have this like really loose idea. Like you said, we had talked about it. We're like, you know what? No pressure. We got things in our lives. I mean, that's kind of how a podcast is as well. It's like we need to create a podcast when we have the capacity for it. If we just force ourselves to create another episode to create the podcast in general, then it might not be fun anymore because we're forced to do it and it'll just feel like another task that we have to do. So I love that you waited until the download happened and like, this is the green light.
And I think of it too as like really honoring the podcast. It's an extension of your brand, it's an extension of your messaging of who you are. When you really embrace, you have something important to share with others on a podcast platform, give it its justice, its space, honor it, right? And let it and cultivate that relationship. So, like I said, well, we have planned, and this was perfect too. I'm giving myself 3 months to do all the behind the work. And right now, we're kind of loosely targeting a September launch, and that can change as well. But I want to really honor this experience and honor the birthing of my podcast.
Earlier, you were talking about from limited belief to empowered belief. So I just want to take a step back in time to that limited belief that you had. You were talking about, like things in your business were changing and things like that. What was that actual timeline like? Are we talking years, months? How did that feel?
So I actually walked into my entrepreneurial journey with that limiting belief, and that actually stems from my corporate experience. I had a very toxic corporate experience that for over a 3-year period, and I'm not exaggerating, I was really asked to be quiet and to shut down and to not share my voice. To the point I was in a conference room speaking on behalf of a project I was leading, and a VP stood up and held her hand out and said, "Kelly, shut up," and asked for someone else to speak on behalf of my project. So I was really well aware at that time that I had a limiting belief that was formed because of my experiences of who am I to say something? Like what I have to say doesn't matter, because I had that lived experience that kept burning it into my, searing it into my brain of I don't have anything important to say. No one wants to hear what I have to say because that was my lived experience. So I went into my entrepreneurial journey knowing that that was something that I needed to break through, or I chose to break through. I wanted to break through because I have something important to say.
Yeah.
And it was probably well over a year into my entrepreneurial journey where I busted through that. Now, I'm trained in mindset coaching, so I have a lot of the tools to do that. I also, about 6 months into my entrepreneurial journey, learned human design. And that is something that I really leverage and advocate for, learning yourself and really that self discovery and living that authentic truth. So, living who you were always meant to be outside of that conditioning. So that limiting belief was just a conditioned experience I had, and that belief was formed. So human design gave me a lot of the tools to release, the awareness of those limiting beliefs, how I've been conditioned to release it. And then my mindset training, I do EFT work as well, really allowed me to transform that. And every day I embrace it more and more and more. And Mary, I told you last night, I did a yoga session for myself on my solar plexus, which is self-confidence and believing yourself, knowing yourself. And that is part of unleashing my voice. And so I've really been on this journey for multiple years of unleashing my voice and knowing that I have something important to share. And my spiritual training teaches me and reminds me that I have a soulmate community that wants to hear it, right? My gifts and talents were given to me for a reason, and that is to share with my soulmate community, meaning I'm not here for everyone. I'm here for a specific group of people.
So then back then, what questions of uncertainty were emerging for you?
That is the story of my life. I dance with uncertainty. It's a fun, like I have built so many muscles to dance with uncertainty because it's just an ongoing experience that I have. So the strategies of launching the podcast, that was an uncertainty. I think when was the right time in my business to really introduce a podcast? And again, like you said, having that energy for it, birthing it, sustaining the momentum and the energy and just the essence of it is something that I'm committed to. So making sure that I'm in alignment with that and I have that capacity for it. The uncertainty was, again, busting through just that what I have to say matters. That was really my the crux of my journey and embracing that, working with my clients, looking for that evidence that what I have to say matters. My, gifts and talents matter. And again, I'm going to repeat myself. There are people that are designed to hear it, that I'm designed to work with. So I didn't have as much uncertainty because of all those things that I really ground into. It was more of just breaking through of that limiting belief of I have something important to say.
So then what did you believe was the most challenging thing about starting a podcast? Was it more technical or still mindset stuff?
Well, and I come from an IT background.
Right.
So I don't shy away from technical work. And I'm smart enough to know this is not my niche. This is not my zone of genius. And I'm smart enough to use and leverage my resources to invest in someone that this is their zone of genius. So that was a really crystal clear decision for me. Like, I'm not going to figure this out on my own. I'm going to hire an expert, which is Mary, and Mary's going to guide me through this process. That to me was the biggest act of self-love and self-care for my podcast, because I didn't want to half show up for the experience. I'm all into the experience, and I waited for that level of commitment. So I wanted the best to guide me through the process. So maybe I know that there's technical stuff that we will tackle, but I know we will tackle it together. I know I have a partner with you, and I know I'm taken care of. I think if I was doing this out on my own, I would have a completely different experience. But I'm not. I hired you.
So hearing yourself now, you are just so positive, but describe your feelings hearing yourself. Talk about what you were like previous, back then without the limited beliefs.
Right. Well, I was hesitant. I was definitely hiding. And again, that goes with I don't have anything to share. So the invisibility, being invisible, hiding, not sharing what I'm here to share. I was playing small. I think 2023 is the year really where Kelly no longer plays small. There was a significant personal event that I went through in 2022 and the beginning of 2023, which was almost the final piece that I needed to do in my life to unleash myself. And it's funny that I'm saying that word, because as soon as that happened, if you would have seen me in January, holy cow. And my assistant, had a side view of everything that was happening with Kelly in January and early February. She's like, "You are unleashed, Kelly." I'm like, "I feel unleashed." And so I renamed my business academy as the Unleashed Business Academy, because everyone should feel unleashed.
And when you were saying all of that, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what an appropriate name for your business too, the Butterfly Guide. Like you are now that butterfly, right? You have emerged from the cocoon.
Absolutely.
And you're going to be this beautiful businesswoman podcaster.
Exactly. Oh, and that vision that I had, and it was actually just last week, was the most beautiful vision that I stepped into. And there was 2 limiting beliefs that came out of that vision of belonging. And then there was one other one, and I wrote it down, but the belonging one really stood out, which was I belong here. I belong. I deserve to take up space in the podcast space, and I belong here. And so leaving that vision, I got the green light to start the podcast, but I also am like, I have homework because I have to go work on those 2 limiting beliefs. I also this was a beautiful process. I'm well aware of the fact, and it came to me that the first 3-4 months of the podcast is going to be hard because it's going to be pushing me to outside my comfort zone. And it's all part of the growing process, right? It's all part of maybe the mastery process to take that imperfect action, because what's driving me is the message that I'm here to share.
Yeah. And that is something that I talk about all the time about podcasting. When you start a podcast, the first episode is going to sound like crap. It'll sound great though in the moment, in that time that we've created it. But what I mean by that is, you're going to be 15 episodes in, 20 episodes in, 50, 100, 200 episodes in. That's when you're like, oh yeah, that first episode sounds like crap.
And that's why it's so important to not compare yourself, right?
Yes.
So we're not going to compare ourselves to all the other people out there. It's really staying inside my bubble or my space. And you can hear me as I talk, because I keep regrounding myself into my truth, into the things that I'm choosing to believe, right? And I'm really grounding into my empowered beliefs, because I'm repeating myself. And that's just giving me that confidence of, again, I have an important message to share. And I have a group of people that want to hear that message. And so we say these mantras to ourselves to help orientate our energy and shift our energy. I teach this in my classes, and it's like, I live in Wisconsin. It's like if, my ultimate goal is to go to New York, but I wake up every day and I don't reground to my compass. And so some days I'm heading to California, some days I'm heading to Florida, but really I want to go to New York. So what do I do instead? When I feel like I need to recenter myself, I look at my compass and I'm like, no, I'm heading to New York. Got it. Okay, let's continue to operate from that path of heading to New York.
And that presence, that present moment as well. And that's the thing I love about podcasting is you can focus one episode at a time, and then you learn from that, and then you move on to the next episode, and then it grows from there. Every time you create a new episode, you've learned something new. And so I love that growing and learning aspect and the presence.
I love it. Yeah. And it's exciting. So some of us, in my human design, I'm a line 3. So anyone that has a human design background, you probably know what that means. But what it means is I learn by trial and error. That is how I'm designed, which also means I have a limiting belief that can get activated of fear of failure. Kind of goes hands in hand because I have to learn by trial and error. I have to make those mistakes. I have to get myself in the game even before I feel ready to be in the game, because I will learn. It's kind of like learning on the job training. But what comes with that in the 48 years that I've been on this planet is some fear of failure. Like, do I really have to go put myself out there and get slung at?
Yeah.
Again?
Why are we putting through that painful process for ourselves?
Right. But knowing myself and knowing my process and knowing, what is optimal for me, it's like, I maybe feel 50% ready right now, right? Really, not from the technical component, but I'm prepared to, speak what I'm here to speak. I probably feel 50% ready, but I know that that's the time to get into the game because the other 50% is going to happen on the job training.
Yeah, exactly. You were talking about fear of failure, and it just reminded me of this question that I was going to ask you. What is a courageous conversation that you want to have on your podcast that we're not having right now in, our day-to-day life?
Oh, I think the most courageous thing a person can do is to be themselves. Everyone deeply desires to know their life purpose. And I truly believe your life purpose is to be you. It's a lot harder than, to be you than you think. I know that's a kind of almost an overused word in the industry. Be authentic, be you. But when you really roll up your sleeve and discover your truth, and here's what I mean by that. We have been, like I said, so conditioned by our early childhood experiences, our work experiences, by our culture, by our society of what is and isn't possible for us. For example, when I wanted to become an entrepreneur, there were some women really close to me that say, why do you want to do that? You can't do that. You have to keep a job. That was their limiting belief. That was their conditioning. And it was people really close to me. So I can easily kind of absorb their conditioning. So when we really release all of that conditioning and embrace who we are and what we really think is true, it's kind of that old movie, Julia Roberts movie, The Runaway Bride, where she ends up creating 40 different eggs because she wanted to know what eggs she liked versus all the men in her life and the eggs they like. So when you really become you and live an authentic life, in business, in your relationships, everything gets so much more joyful, so much more sweeter, so much more deep. Like you have real connections, you have real relationships. You can enjoy the little things in life in addition to the big things. And you just walk around with a grateful heart because you're not hiding yourself anymore and you don't need to hide yourself anymore.
Yeah, I love that explanation because yes, I had the same conversation with somebody else on another podcast. It's like, being authentic is just such an overused word. Like, what does that really mean now? So I love your explanation of that.
Thank you. Yeah. And so I leveraged human design and mindset work to just really, what are my limiting beliefs, and questioning them. And human design gives you a great blueprint to understand yourself, but you need to do the work. You need to work with your design and go, oh, that's how I'm designed to operate. That's what, my energy is telling me.
So what is your energy telling you right now? What main question is emerging for you as you step into this podcasting space?
Main question. Well, I was going to say, again, if we go back to the manifesting generator that I am, and you can hear it in my voice, I'm lit up. That my energy is telling me is this is energetically correct for me. And my body speaks to me by wanting to get up and run to it. And I'm literally fighting to get up. I'm sitting down right now, like, I want to start this. I am so ready for this. And like we said, I already coached myself. I'm 50% ready. I'm not going to lie to anyone. I'm 50% ready. And I'm going to know what to do the rest of the way. And Mary is going to get me. It's kind of like you're going to walk me on the playing field. And once I get onto that playing field, I'm going to stumble, I'm going to fumble, but I'm going to get up and do it. And I'm going to get up and do it again. And it's going to work itself out because I did this because it was energetically correct for me. I didn't force myself into doing this. I didn't, from my mind, say, this is a good thing for my business. I'm just going to spin up a podcast. I waited for the energetic alignment. And so I really don't have a lot of fear because, again, I have that energetic alignment. I've done everything in the way that is energetically correct for me to tell me this is the absolute right time to do this. And I've made the decisions and the investments to fill the gaps of my knowledge. And I'm doing everything in a planned way. Like I'm giving it space to launch and I'm giving it space to birth. So the plan has really given me the confidence and the stability to launch my podcast.
Oh, that's so awesome. And, I also just want to say thank you so much as well for just saying all these kind words about me. And we haven't even started working together yet.
Well, we'll have to come back after we work together.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Like, well, you'll have to come back on the show and then talk about how, okay, you are 100% podcaster. Capital P,
Yes.
that's part of your title, and we'll have to talk about that after.
Oh my goodness. Another thing that's coming up for me right now, and I'll just share because you've been asking these questions of, like you said, embracing that identity of being a podcaster. I still have, in my marketing, let's just say, of, okay, I'm going to go on TikTok now. Everyone gets to see me on TikTok. I'm not one of those people that loves social media. And I use the right social media that's energetically correct for me. So I enjoy doing what I'm doing. And it's because there's an element of privacy that I still like to have. And so being that podcaster that has an important message, it's kind of like coming out of the closet a little. So there's still some resistance and hesitancy. So this, again, something I get to work with, something I get to brace. Because people that I care about, right? My kids are going to hear my podcast.
Yes. My daughter, for the record, she loves listening to me on podcasts. So your kids are probably going to enjoy it.
I hope so, because I can subliminally teach them lessons that they don't want to know.
I know. Oh, exactly. As we wrap up here, just two last things. First of all, I would love for you to finish the sentence stem. When I start my podcast, it will be possible to.
Ooh, when I start my podcast, it will be possible. Oh, so much possibility is coming to me. It will be possible to be unleashed. It will be possible to bring my message to those that want to hear it, that are meant to hear it. For me, though, another big piece is it will be possible to share me. Like that unleashed version. Again, it's been a journey, right? It's a journey to put your words out there. It's a journey to be confident. It's a journey to maybe share some of those things that you wouldn't normally get on stage to share.
Yeah.
That feels really good to be expressed, fully expressed. It really does. It's scary. It feels really, really good.
Yeah. And I think that's what people love about podcasting. Well, myself especially, is like it's not social media. And we have the capacity to create a platform in however way we choose to express ourselves. And it is a very, very private and intimate platform because people are listening to our voices, our heart in their ears, like literally right next to their brains, our voice is with them. So it is very private and intimate. And I love how you're saying that you can unleash yourself and be fully who you are.
And what's coming to me as well, if I can add to it,
Mm-hmm.
I know everyone focuses on the metrics. How many people did the messaging, all of that, how many downloads did I have, et cetera. And I can understand that from a business perspective, so you can make good decisions and stuff like that. Anyone that's starting a podcast and you launch that first episode, I'm going to do this myself, and I'm going to invite anyone else to celebrate yourself, because it took so much to get to that point that it's so worth celebrating. You transformed your mindset. You remove blocks. You took that empowered action to really birth your podcast. And I did something similar to this recently. I put on a masterclass, and it was like, it's not about the outcome anymore. It's about the person that showed up today, because she, just went through a 3-month journey, and she is an amazing person that's standing today that has so many things to share. That was who I celebrated. And then you get to go on another journey after that, right? And really just starting to master that craft.
I love that you mentioned that, because the program that we're going to go on together is my 12-week podcast launch. It's one-on-one. We go through each week, all the different aspects of the podcast. And actually the last week I do have titled Celebrate Your Launch.
Aww,
so we will be celebrating, Kelly.
Yes. That's why I picked you, Mary.
I mean, like you said, I hear it in your voice. You are excited. But my last question to all my guests is always, what are you most excited about podcasting right now?
My message gets to be shared with many people. And let me just preface this, or let me just paint a picture. I did a photo shoot for my brand about 2 years ago, and my stylist had been going through a visioning process. And Kelly was always on stage talking to 500 people. And I'm like, that is just not something I'm interested in. But okay, I dressed for being on stage. What I'm really, really, really excited about again is that I'm no longer playing small. And that is something to celebrate. That has been that 5-year journey of Kelly has something powerful to say, and she's going to say it. And I'm no longer willing to play small, and I'm no longer willing to be invisible. And I am going to come out. And this podcast is meant to speak to the many, and to empower the many, and to inspire the many. I am ready for that.
Kelly, this is going to be an awesome journey we're going to go on together. I cannot wait to hear the podcast when it is finally launched. So you'll have to come back on the show, and we'll talk about it, the whole
Definitely.
process.
We'll do a debrief. Yes.
So, okay, here we are celebrating. You are going to start this journey. Audio only. I have a cup of water with me, so I'm going to cheers you through this cup of water through the microphone.
Love it. Cheers too.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Hey, cheers to you too, if you've started a podcast. Yes. Or cheers as well for you to take that next step in starting your podcast if you hadn't started one yet. Like Kelly mentioned, it is a lot of work, and it is worth celebrating. So cheers. But like I said, and even if you haven't started your podcast yet, all of this podcasting work starts with mindset. When Kelly was told at that beginning stage that it's a saturated market, I can't believe somebody had said that, because it actually is not, especially compared to blogs, social media. Those numbers are huge in comparison to podcasting. And with podcasting, another beautiful thing, it's not saturated. Yes, there are a lot of people getting into it, but there are a lot of people who maybe started with 1 or 2 episodes and then stopped because they're like, wait a minute, this is not for me. They never thought about why they wanted to podcast. They were just podcasting because it seemed like the next greatest thing. And so, no, podcasting won't be successful if you're just like, I think I'm just going to give this a try and see what happens. No, we need a game plan. And it is not social media either. If you really want a more deep dive into why podcasting is not social media, you got to go back and listen to episode number 28. Social media is not an intimate space to share your thoughts. That's what podcasting is great for. Kelly also mentioned taking that imperfect action to start her podcast, and I love that. You know, this is already something I speak about a lot, especially if you go back to episode number 9, starting a perfectly imperfect podcast. I talk all about that. So I was so happy to hear that she is embracing this idea of imperfect action. So if you haven't listened to episode 9 yet, go to that one after this one's done, and you will really deep dive for your next actionable step. And like Kelly said, are you 50% ready? Heck, even 25%, that's fine too. Are you ready to be unleashed? I'd love to support you in creating your podcast as well, just as I am now with Kelly. And that way we get to celebrate your launch together. So let's chat about it. You can schedule a complimentary 30-minute strategy session to see if your podcast idea is worth sharing. And spoiler alert, I bet it is. So you can either head to my website, book that chat, visiblevoicepodcast.com, or the link will also be in the show notes. And just like anything, when I start something new, I'm so looking forward to the whole process. Launching a podcast with Kelly, and maybe you too. We'll definitely have to have Kelly back on the show after her podcast is launched to hear how that 50% ready shifted over the course of creating her podcast. And so if you want to get yourself 50% ready, or like I said, maybe 25% ready, I'd love to chat with you about your podcast ideas. So I'll chat with you soon, either through the complimentary 30-minute strategy session I talked about, or on the next episode. So I'll talk to you then. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you'd share it with a podcasting friend. And to reveal more voicing and podcasting tips, click on over to visiblevoicepodcast.com. Until next time.